And those are hypotheses or research questions. And then ideally, your results indeed test that hypothesis, and your discussion interprets the results. Okay? So back to literature. You know, that bibliography or literature cited section at the end of your manuscript may seem like an add-on. It actually is the crucial links of your work to all preceding work. So it's actually pretty important. And it's amazing how many established scientists really do a poor job with their literature cited. And so in the old days, you would, you know, type in the reference as you're writing, and then type in the full bibliographic citation, and then write more, and there goes the reference, and now here goes the next citation. And the terrible thing was, if the journal rejected your paper and you had to send it to another journal, then you had to reformat all of the in-text citations and all of the full bibliographic references. And in EndNote, again, I hate for-pay software, this is formatted for the ORIX, and all you do is change that and it reformats to the next journal. Not always exactly correct, but it's almost there. So I'm not saying buy EndNote. I really should try out Zotero. I don't know it. Mendeley was improving along this line. One of my students has been using it, and yet I see her doing stuff in her manuscripts that is a bit pathological, which is to say all of the in-text citations will be unformatted, and this is a person with a master's in computer science, so it's not that she's not able, but at the very end they get formatted. And so it's very clear that Mendeley is not doing this seamlessly or comfortably. So that's about literature. I'll come back to that, but basically, if anybody gives me a manuscript, some of you know that I'm a pathological editor, right? Moses has been through a sequence of my edits in recent months. I can always find errors in your literature cited section. And in fact, a few years ago I made a challenge. I was frustrated with my graduate students. And so I made a challenge for them where I took one page out of the journal Evolution, and I introduced 50 errors into that page, which was from the literature cited. So I created 50 errors. And then that way I knew exactly what the errors were. And then I said to my students, okay, who can find all 50? And I think, Lynette won with 48? So in one sense, I was disappointed that nobody found all 50. And a lot of the students were not up to 48. Maybe they didn't put enough time into it. But the funny thing is that when I pulled that page out of the journal Evolution, thinking I would add errors, I reviewed it quickly, and in fact, I found errors in the published text. Okay? So this is always a place, literature cited is always a place where we do a bad job. Okay, so that's just some generalities. Now let's start talking about some specific elements. So let's talk about figures. And essentially what we'll do is I will start off with some generalities about design and about just kind of how to make things visual. And then I'm going to pass the ball to Arturo, who's going to speak kind of more specifically about color and how that plays into all of this. It's a really fascinating topic and a crucial topic. So let's start with this. This morning I went into PLOS One, which is a non-parasitic open access journal. And I was just looking for good and bad figures. And notice that explicitly I didn't grab the caption. Because a good visual doesn't really need a lot of explanation. Right? I mean, I can hold this up, and if I explain it enough, you'll know what I'm trying to explain. But a good figure does that on its own. So, are these good figures? Here's a test. Emily. Is this the same value as this? Why? It's not what? So you're looking at the scale? No, I'm just saying the same shade of gray, right? I can see that this goes from fairly dark to almost white, and this goes from almost white to fairly dark. But you guys can't see it, and I can, that here fairly dark means 773 species, and here it means 227 species. Okay? And nobody reads the scale, nobody reads the caption.
And not everybody prints in color.
Well, that is the color ramp they chose to use.
But when you print it,
I know.
it's tiny.
I know. So right away we have two different scales that are getting confused visually. As Kate said, we have this thing about printing in color. If you can use color in the journal, why not use it intelligently? Arturo will come back to that. Let's look at this figure. It's a really simple figure. We don't need color here, right? Because it doesn't have multiple things. But if I look at that, what I see is big letters, big numbers, right? And so I can almost not see the actual content. The font is far too big. This is really bad. Look at that one.
You know what I'm wondering could be, sometimes the journal requires you to have a certain font size on your figures, and I wonder if they tried to shove everything onto that page, and so they ended up with this gigantic font.
I have a paper in press at PLOS, Neglected Tropical Diseases, and their visual people are really good. And she did say, the one I'm contacted with, did say to me that there's a minimum font size for the labels on graphs. But what she would have said is get rid of the 50s, at the very least. But to my eye, this font is quite a bit larger than need be. The other thing is, look at the size of the image, and now look at the size of what we care about in the image. It's occupying about 2/3 of the overall extent of the image. And so much better would be to find a way to make this shorter and get these into the square of the figures so that the actual content can get bigger. And by making the text smaller, that starts to de-emphasize that. You know, Moses and Joel are probably seeing mostly text and not a lot of this. And I would make this jump off the page a little bit more. Okay? I know, it's easy to be a backseat driver or an armchair quarterback. That's a US phrase. But some of these things are pretty clear. Now, look at this figure. All of this was in the current issue, so this is not old stuff. Again, I'm not showing you the caption. I didn't even read the caption. But do you notice, I mean, what are these? Why are these sitting out here in the middle of nothing? And also, I think what this figure wants me to do is to take these and relate them to these. Right? So I have to go in here and find SC. Oh, there it is. Now where's FC? There it is. But you're making me look for letter combinations. And there's SC and SA, there's TS and TC. You're asking my eye to do a lot. How about using symbols? How about doing something that my eye can immediately relate? Or better yet, how about taking this tree and putting it on top of that so that I can see the correspondence directly? Again, we have a lot of white space. So that's wasted visual field. And perhaps worst of all is without reading the caption, which I don't want to do, I don't know what A, B, C, and D are. Right? So one of the points I always make is you can put a label right here that tells me what panel C is, and right here that tells me what panel D is, and then I don't need to be referring figure, caption, figure, caption. Make it easy for your reader. In the 3 or 4 papers that I looked at, this was kind of the one that I liked the best. I don't even know what it's doing, but I could see immediately that it's creating different sets of factors, and it's looking at different combinations of them, but it's making me think with them, and I can pretty much understand it. So when you look at a figure, first question is, can you read it? Because sometimes axis labels will be minute. Is it attractive and interesting? And does it convey the message? Okay? A little bit of technology. Wherever you prepare your figures, I guess here I am using another proprietary program, save the pieces that you made it from. So for example, in preparing the maps from this course, we're going to output images, probably as in TIFF format, from QGIS. Okay? They'll be nice and detailed. They'll be big files. And then you're going to have to put lettering on top of that, or put that into a grid of images, something to make it a good, useful, functional figure. Well, you want to save the versions along the way. You want to save whatever platform you developed it in, you've got to save that, because without a doubt the reviewers are going to come back and say, figure 4 is confusing because, and you don't want to have to go all the way back to the GIS program or all the way back to the stats program and re-export everything. Save all the pieces. And then I've gotten into the habit of exporting a light version. So like a JPEG, which are pretty small and efficient. JPEGs are bad as far as preserving all the detail, but they're wonderful in that we can all open them, and they're small. So when I'm coming down to the end of a manuscript, and I'm happy with the way my figures look, I'm saving all of the pieces. I have to admit, I use Adobe Illustrator, and I export a nice detailed JPEG, which I really don't want to be published because I want to give them a more detailed TIFF for publication, but the JPEG is wonderful for review. Okay, it's the same format as all the photos we take. So this is that point that I mentioned to you about labeling. Here, I have panels A, B, and C. They make pretty good use of space. I can read them pretty well. They're going to be understandable in black and white or in color. But in order to understand, I kind of have to read the y-axis. Notice that the A, B, and C are taking up some space at the top. Why not just put a little label right there? This can be moved down here. I mean, it's easy. And this figure would then stand alone much better. So this is a little bit wasteful of space. See all that white space there? And these upper bars around the graphs. But here, I can right away, without looking at the caption, I can look at agricultural lands, freshwater withdrawals, all the different pieces of that figure. Okay? So my students know very well the torture that I inflict on them in editing. I almost always edit by hand. And there's a reason for that. Because if I edit your paper electronically, and if I send it back to you, you're going to do accept changes, and you're not going to look at the changes. Okay?
I have a statement for that. The problem is not the handwritten editing. The problem is that he scans it or takes a picture with his phone. And so when you try to read it, you know, it doesn't always work.
Well, there are different levels. If at all possible, I use a scanner. If that's not possible, I'll take a really good quality picture of each page. And in moments of desperation, if the student is saying, I need this tomorrow, and if the only thing I have is my phone, then you get a photo from my phone. What Kate is referring to is a point where I was residing in another country, and let's just say the secretary of the institute where I was residing was a little bit scary. And so I asked her once or twice to scan things for me. And she was kind of so grumpy with me that I never did again. And so those couple of months, my students had to deal with cell phone pictures.